It's me, Brian, with Comic Breakdown. I am here with Trevor, and we are getting into his new Kickstarter, which went live today. Trevor, want to tell him a little bit about that?
Yeah, man. Well, it's super cool to be hanging out and to be streaming on both of our channels. So get a wide pool of people come hang out with us. But my comic book is Area 51, the Helix Project. It's a sci-fi noir indie book that pretty much presupposes that the specimen that was massively cited in Roswell, New Mexico in the late 40s masquerades on Earth for about 15 to 20 years, and he ends up exposing himself in order to save a human child, which is done right in front of his son in cold blood, resulting in his death. And so, tortured by the loss, the son, Kent, spends the next 15 years struggling to pick up the pieces until he's mysteriously confronted by someone claiming to have been there on the day that his father was murdered, and that they have a means of getting him back. So Kent, driven to uncover the circumstances surrounding his supposed murder, of his father, and struggling to reconciling these dueling senses of identity, is led further into the jaws of a Cold War genetics conspiracy. And what's left of him is forced to confront a twisted ghost from his past as it plunges a dagger into everything he knows about what it means to be human, and about himself, really.
How many times have you said that?
So many times, man, especially at like live shows, Comic-Cons, signings. I'm like, and honestly, it was weird because when I first started doing the live appearances and such, I used to be so nervous, and I used to like mess up and like have all these different ways of explaining the book. And you know me, I'll go off on a tangent. So I will have explained the book in like 20 different ways by the end of the day. So I was like, I need something a little bit more concrete now, a little bit more polished, to point people our way.
Yeah, you've definitely got it down to a T on that. So yeah, we're getting into issue number 4, which I'm excited for. Actually, I finally get a chance to properly show this off because this is the metal plate you sent me last time. This metal plate is just absolutely beautiful. And are you going to be offering this in the Kickstarter?
Yeah, so it's going to be available for people at the producer level, which grants you a bunch of different awards. But namely, as it sounds, you'd actually be credited on the inside back cover of the book as a producer of the series. And fun little thing is apparently it carries a little bit of weight because I did have an executive producer who has produced all of the first 3 issues of the Helix Project, and now the 4th. And he had applied for a professional badge at New York Comic-Con this past year with the credentials as one of my executive producers, and just put me as a reference. And he got a professional badge just by being a producer.
That's fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool perk I didn't even know was possible when I came up with that idea. But yeah, so they are made available through those tiers only. But we do have a bunch of other cool stuff. Like I know you have another print behind you there that's just a beautiful cardstock print, super thick, high definition, saturated. And we are offering in this Kickstarter as one of the stretch goals an upgrade for everybody at the artist print tier and up, this cool like foil version of the new covers. And if you guys haven't seen the new covers, you should, because they would both look bomb as hell with a foil texture, which you can click the link in the description next to my name. It'll open up a link tree. Top link in that category is the Kickstarter. You can peek at the covers, and don't you tell me that those won't look good in foil.
Yeah, that the one you have behind you, that's actually my favorite cover that you've done so far. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's beautiful. Like I've said it over and over. I've commended, your pick on artists and colorists and so on and so forth. And it's been knocked out of the park, man. Like it's such top tier work, especially like I've been going over even Keanu Reeves comic. Like, and I know a lot of people are big fans of Ron Garney, and I just can't get into his art style. And to me, what you have chosen to go with your line of work is far superior than the artwork of Ron Garney. You know what I mean?
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And these, they're talented guys. I'm super fortunate to have the ability to work with such talented people so early on in my career. and so, for me, it was primarily like my primary focus was finding guys that are able to tell stories using images. That's the most important thing above the aesthetic, and above the style. But I also wanted to appeal to folks that might be coming over from that more traditional DC or Marvel house style, looking for just the cool shading aesthetic, a little bit of dimension to it. So I tried to kind of meet the best of both worlds as best as I could. And, I'm fortunate to have guys like Marcelo, who has been in the industry for about as long as I've been alive, which is crazy, and our colorist Marcio, who is so instinctive in the way that he selects color palettes or shades and tones in order to best fit a scene. It's just been incredible, having these guys on my squad. So I appreciate the compliment, and that is also my favorite cover. I know a lot of folks are really digging the new variant cover to issue 4 quite a bit, but as the pretentious writer of the series, this is the most symbolic and therefore my favorite.
Yeah, I love the way it plays out. Let's see, Nick Wilson. Hey, what's going on, Nick? Nick actually, he got a free copy of your comic. He got an issue number 1 for his birthday. I try to, when people let me know it's their birthday, I try to send them out something if I can.
That's rad.
So he's been a pretty hard fan of yours since then. Hopefully Kickstarter is down in the comments. Make sure you guys support that.
Come on, Nick. You want to do it, man.
And speaking of the Kickstarter, we're going to talk about that for a second. What are the tiers that you have? What tiers are you most excited about?
Oh, dude, there are so many cool tiers on this one. So first of all, like, as you know, I offer my books pretty cheap, to my own financial chagrin,
especially for the quality. The quality is like, if you go pick up a DC and Marvel comic, like maybe the front page is going to be good quality, but the inside is not going to be nearly as good. You like every single one of your pages like a high gloss, just beautiful heavy page. And it's just really nice to hold in your hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And I don't know if you got to pull out the cardstock ones from issue 3, but those ones were nuts. And I was super fortunate to, despite all the craziness with shipping, get that to our issue 3 backers, like a version of the book that'll never be re-released again, and is in fleeting quantity. But yeah, so the comic starts itself as a mere $5 for a 24-page story, right? Like DC and Marvel will sell you a $5 comic with 20 pages of story and 4 pages of ads. There's no advertisements in the book. It's 100% story and art. So there's that. It's a super easy break-in point. And if you only read digital, you can get all 4 issues of the book for $16 to catch up to the series. And I find it accessible. So anytime I try to bundle stuff up together, you save a little bit of money, and there's quite a few. Like what I think is probably the most popular tier is getting the cover bundle with the artist print. So you'll get digital copies of all 4 issues in this tier, for example, a signed first print edition of issue 4 and a signed first print variant of issue 4. You get a premium comic art print, which, if we can break that stretch goal, will be a super sweet foil, like metallic version of it. And you get an early digital copy of issue 4, specifically before I even send out the physical books or the rest of the digitals. So that one's super cool. I think it's like $35 for everything. And I think, again, it's probably some of the most accessible. And if you do end up wanting that tier and say you haven't gotten on the series so far, once you click your pledge, there will be a list of numerous add-ons that you can add on to the purchase, including any of the previous issues of the book, a cool Pocket Watch Press mask, which is my company, amongst a bunch of other really cool things. Like we have this really rad t-shirt that people have been going nuts over, which is the issue 4 variant with a quote from one of the comics that says, I wonder if I can screen share on this software. That's the real question, because that would be a lot easier.
Have you had any deliveries to Australia?
So ironically, I do have a backer that was supposed to. Well, so yes, so I've had numerous over the course of the last couple of campaigns, but most recently there was an issue, I guess, with like the Australian government or the postal service, like severely lessening the amount of packages that they're taking in due to COVID. So I wasn't able to ship most recently to one of our backers from issue 3. We're hoping that now that things are clearing up, it'll be a lot easier and I'll just ship them 3 and 4 together. But yeah, we are definitely shipping to Australia. We're shipping all over the world.
Nice.
So, we can get that to you regardless of where you're located. But what I was going to say about that other shirt that's made available, and it's only made available for the first week of the campaign. It says most stories follow the tales of gods and monsters and men, but this one really only concerns the monsters. And it's a picture of it's an image of a character literally ripping his face off. So it tells you a lot about kind of what this book is about metaphorically. So yeah, that's one of the many cool options. Obviously, like I said, you can get credit as a producer, and also
you can get drawn into the book.
Getting drawn into the book is normally it's normally an offering. This is the first one where we haven't offered it yet. We're thinking about opening up one slot. But two more of my favorite tiers are two that are available, where you can get commissions from my interior artist Marcelo, or for the first time, my variant cover artist who did this image, amongst a couple of other ones that people have just been going absolutely nuts for. And this is the first time that a commission from Adrian's going to be made available. There are only 2 slots open, and they're physical, like done in pencil and ink commissions. The dude is incredibly talented. So if you want to take a look at them, again, link in the description next to follow Trevor. Go scroll down the Kickstarter, look at the art, because these guys are redonkulously talented. And both those tiers also grant you a bunch of other rewards like shirts, obviously copies of the book, an exclusive producer sweater, producer credit, so on and so forth. I think those are executive producer tiers, actually. So you get to be a step above the rest.
Heck yeah. That sounds like a lot of fun, man. I wish I could afford the higher tier ones. I'm just too broke for it. But I definitely splurge for the variant cover, and because the variant, the variant and the regular cover, I just love those all together. But so let's get on to talking about this comic. So you've done 3 issues of the Helix Project so far, so you have a little bit of experience, kind of know what you're doing, or you're getting a feel of what you want to do. So what have you done differently in issue 4 that you didn't do in the previous issues?
I think, so here, it's a weird thing, right? So at this stage now, I've written all 6. So I'm coming at this with a little bit more of a complete head. But in every issue, I mean, my intent is to pick up skills that I didn't have the issue prior, and use them to build this story in that moment in the best way it possibly can be added on to. So I think it was interesting. So the first 3 issues, I exercised a lot of restraint, right? Because I'm like, we're dealing in comics. We're not going to have prose, like a super dense prose or narration or whatever. It'll be rhythmic and punctual, and it will add to moments, but I'll always be a little bit more reserved. And with issue 4, based off of where we end issue 3, which I'm not going to spoil, but is the craziest transition between issues by far. It's going to require a little to be a little bit more inside the character's head and to get a little bit more of the sort of cerebral consequences of the end of issue 3. So I actually exercised, in a sense, a little bit less control, but I feel like, in terms of like pulling myself back with the amount of text. But to another extent, I think that I've earned it because I've relied so much on silence and certain things like that, building scenes in prior issues. Now I'm kind of like, okay, we're going to introduce a little bit of contrast here so that when I do become the silent writer again, it's going to be punctuated a lot more by that contrast.
Yes, definitely. So you said it's going to be 6 issues. That do you have more planned going on, or do you want to move on to something else after that?
Yeah, I as much as I love the Helix Project, man, I wanted to make sure that the first story I did was tight and that it was something that I could finish and proved myself that I could finish a story well. So for all intents and purposes, Helix Project ends with 6. However, I've left myself in a position where if I ever wanted to come back and play somewhere in that space, I can, despite the fact that the main narrative is 100% going to come to an ending. After the Helix Project, the plan is to go back to Kickstarter and crowdfund an anthology. It's an oversized comic that's going to have somewhere between 8 to 10 short stories where I get to work with a bunch of different artists in a bunch of different genres. And all the stories are going to be loosely tied together by like a broad theme. And this one being perspective, because I want to release these anthologies yearly, maybe bi-yearly at some point. And each anthology is going to represent a numeral on the clock, on the pocket watch. So the first anthology, we actually announced the name in our newsletter about a week ago, is Minutes to Midnight, the Hour Between Life and Death. And the through line is going to be perspective. Nice. So we've got a bunch of different stories in a bunch of different genres with a bunch of great new talent. As you guys have already might know about me, is I have a really critical eye for story and for art. And man, this next batch of guys that I'm working with are just so incredibly talented. So I'm super stoked for that. And then after that, I do have another series in mind that I have been working on. It's a supernatural sort of historical political thriller. Think the Illuminati meets Inception meets Paradise Lost. So it's a little bit biblical. It's very cerebral. And I actually just wrapped maybe a couple weeks ago the first issue of that book in script. Nice. And it's my favorite thing I've ever written. Nice. And I'm in the middle of issue 2, and issue 2 of that is honestly already a strong contender. So that will actually, if you can catch it, if you pick up issue 4, there is a cameo that exposes the name of that next series in issue 4 for those with a really keen eye. So I'm super, super excited about that. And the really cool thing is a prior executive producer from another campaign, another Kickstarter campaign of mine from the Helix Project. The guys that have been with me from the beginning, you know, who buy in to get drawn into the book, I like to give them really special placement. So for example, a previous backer, his likeness gets to be the character that basically announces my next book, which is super rad. So yeah, that's going to be exciting. I don't know if I lost track of the question, but
no, you're good. We got a few comments here anyway. Let's see. Comic Boom and Nerdette, they both had to go at the last minute, unfortunately. So it's just me and Trevor, or Dark Knight Nation. And Trevor, how was the reception of the series during your convention tour?
It was really good, man. Thank you for asking. My favorite were like the folks that would come at the beginning of the show and then buy like issue 1, and then they'll come back the next day and they're like, I need to buy 2 and 3, or something along those lines, or they'll come back and tell me what they thought. I love that. That was so much fun. And for me, starting the company in the middle of COVID, there's like only so much. There's really only so much that I could do in like getting myself out there and communicating and reaching out and talking to readers or potential readers. So this has been such a fun opportunity to connect, and it's easier to express the passion that I have for this stuff in person. It's just been super exciting, and we've gotten a lot of new readers by going to these shows, and I'm super grateful to the people that stand around and let me blabber and hang out. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's been fantastic. And this year is going to be crazy for convention appearances. I have about a dozen shows, that I am more than likely going to all of them. And some of them are big and they're all around the country. I'm even going to Canada. So you may or may not see me and the, currently missing Comic Boom link up, for the first time in what will be 3 years, which is crazy. So it's going to be awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to hopefully make it out to Dallas and see you out there.
Hell yeah, man.
I got a buddy that lives out that way, so I might have to just bug him and stay in his guest house for the weekend.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah.
Do you have plans on maybe making all 6 issues, bringing it out as one full novel?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a goal, and, I get a lot of folks that ask me that for very good reason. You know, you want a digestible story. The problem is when you have books that are done at the independent level where it's all self-funded, if these 6 issues don't get enough steam behind them, I won't be in a position to finish the series in print and, and going even further to printing a trade paperback. So, yeah, I would
Yeah.
absolutely love to, and I hope to, but that is 100% contingent on the support of these 6 issues. And it's even like that in, I mean, Big Two publishing, and imagine the
Mhm.
little guy here who's kind of getting his boots dirty and having to pick this thing from the ground up. So I would love to, and I look forward to the day where I get to design a trade paperback. But I if we don't get the support now, we won't be able to then. So if you want to get the trade in physical, maybe, think about backing the Kickstarter on the digital level so you can at least read it. It's cheaper that way. And then hopefully get the trade later, but at least that way you're contributing to the potential of us having a trade paperback. So thank you. Thank you for the question.
And then Mark says, hi. Also, what have you changed with the contour from start to now?
Hello, Mark. One of our most adamant supporters. Big shout out to Mark. He has been a producer on the first 3 issues of the series and has just shown me an incredible amount of support that I am grateful for beyond words. And I look forward to the day where I can shake this man's hand and potentially buy him a drink, because I owe you at least that much, if not my firstborn child. But what have I changed from the start? I mean, at the beginning, and I'm not like a veteran at Comic Cons yet, but I've certainly learned a lot in the couple that I've gone to and tabled at. But in the beginning, I was definitely flying a little bit more by the seat of my pants. I definitely over ordered on certain pieces of merchandise, thinking that they would do well, and they didn't. So there's that. So it's about economizing, and in the beginning, particularly, I was super anxious about I don't want to sell out and just not have a book to sell to somebody. So I brought way too much stuff. So I've learned to pare that down. I literally have a hard shell suitcase that kind of has a lot of my setup already inside of it. The only extra thing I need is a box with the comics. So yeah, it's just been about economizing and optimizing space. And I'm really glad I got one of these bad boys because these are super rad. So that was an absolute necessity. And it was actually a big impulse buy that I feel very gratified in.
All right. How old are you again, Trevor?
24.
24. Okay, I thought so. Because I was thinking there's so many indie comic guys out there, that are doing the Kickstarters. And most of them are pretty old. Most of them are, in their mid 30s, late 40s, somewhere in there. And so it's rare that you have someone so young that's putting out comics and, you've had 3 successful campaigns. I know you were worried about the last campaign as it was getting close to it.
Yeah.
But, how does it feel being, so young in the industry and really being a driving force for the next generation?
Oh, shit.
And I bring this up because I've always told you, I feel like this is like an episode of the X-Files that I'm watching. I'm expecting Sculler and Mulder to show up, and you have no idea what I'm talking about.
No, I remember
because
you afforded me that compliment once, and I was
yeah.
like, I haven't seen X-Files. What's it about?
And so it just blew my mind, and I've, I'm gonna be 32 here in like 2 months. And so, seeing you come up versus everything else that's around you, it's really awesome to see. And how do you feel about that?
Well, I appreciate the compliment. First of all, man.
There's
God,
not many 24-year-olds out there putting out comics like you are.
I appreciate that.
It's just not happening.
I mean, for me, I don't know. Like, if anybody kind of met me back when I was just doing the review stuff, I just became really driven in like the analysis and like the crafting of a really solid story and like trying to find the balance between all of these really integral pieces that could possibly go into a story. Nevertheless, like a sequential visual story like comics that just has tenfold more to integrate with. But I've always been driven just by quality and excellence. So, I try to put out something every time that's better than what I can do, that's better than what I think I can do, and just always trying to to step my game up. I'm really hungry, man. Like, I'm really hungry in the sense that I want to be one of the best comic book writers to ever live, and I know that for a fact. There's so much ridiculous talent out there now. There's so much ridiculous talent that you look at in the history of the industry. And so if I want to be that person truly, it's going to require every bit of energy that I can possibly give it in becoming the best writer I can. And whether that's me studying screenwriting or film directing in order to learn how to tell my story visually, or whether that's going through an entire run of a character chronologically in order to get a sense of how to compress time and things of that nature. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So I don't know, man. I'm pushing for quality. I'm pushing for no nonsense, no gimmicks, Like, if you go to my Kickstarters, I'm not gonna offer you like bare naked women and like big breasts and ass. I'm not gonna offer you a million variant covers, because despite the fact that I could probably be far more successful if I did that and make the money, what I'm concerned about is delivering a high quality comic, in the value of the book itself and in the content. So if you're going to buy my book, I want you to do it because there's quality behind it, not because there's a gimmick. Maybe it's a self-destructive pride thing, but it's something that I maintain a lot of pride on. So I don't know, man. I mean, I've never considered myself as somebody who's pioneering anything.
Mhm.
But I think that, the thing that might make me stand out is that sort of artistic integrity and that deep, deep hunger to be excellent at what I do and to contribute to the landscape of comics in the best way that I possibly can, because it is the greatest storytelling medium of all time and by far the most underappreciated. So, if my grand purpose is just to make more people appreciate comics, then I'm going to try to do that in every single way I possibly can.
Definitely. Yeah, I would definitely like to see I would like to see you work for the big two, just so you can get that name recognition of working for one of the big two, and then go off and do your own thing. Because I mean, that's what we're seeing a lot of right now. We got Scott Snyder and everyone else out there, making their own Nocterra lines or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And we're having a lot of success steering away from the big two and really diving into indie comics like yours. But talking about inspiring, let's dive into one of these questions. Some Okie dude, he said, what inspired you to make Area 51? Any particular books, shows, movies that made you want to do Area 51?
Mm, Honestly, no. So the major thing for me was that when I was thinking about getting into writing comics, I was going to school for molecular and cellular biology at the University of Connecticut, and I was always told, write what you know. And well, I knew a lot about molecular science and genetics, and I have a very strong penchant for thematic storytelling and trying to connect these sort of fantastic, unrealizable events to very real sentiments or feelings or emotions, or experiences to some degree. So for me, it was about integrating that love for deeply thematic and emotional storytelling with something that I knew. And well, what do I know about? I knew a lot about science. Um, so I ended up declaring a double major in English as well, and really pushing to study the craft of writing, and the craft of storytelling in general. And that all kind of came together in the Helix project. And for me, it was also, when I started plating this story, it was really tight. It's a really tight cast. It's a really tight story. And for me to come out with this on my first venture, I feel like it's still while it's still a pretty large swing. It's 6 issues, it's 24 pages of story per issue. I wanted to keep the story tight and manageable so that I could prove to myself that I could wrap up a story and do it well. And so, for example, the next series that I do, it's not an ensemble book, but there's a much larger cast and there's a much larger mythology to it. And so I want to make sure that I can handle these things and handle them in a really satiable and interesting way before I just kind of go out and expand, because there are different skill sets to telling super tight, boot to the ground stories and telling super large ensemble cosmic crazy. So yeah, it was really just me embracing my background, and the things that I love about telling stories.
Nice. All right, so let's see. We got one more question here. It's from Mark. He says, "How does the future anthology format idea come to be, and what kind of genre of storytelling will you offer?"
Um, Well, so the anthology kind of just came to be out of, so I got far enough in the Helix project where I was like, man, I really feel like I've grown a lot over the last year as a writer. Um, and I kind of wanted to, I mean, and I was just excited to work with more and more different types of artists with different skill sets and styles. So it was partly me just kind of wanting to flex those other muscles, that I feel like I've built up and not yet to um, put on display. So and getting to work with a bunch of different artists and just really learn a little bit more about the collaborative art of comics, with a wider lens and a wider scope of people. So yeah. And it was all again tied together by the fact that I looked at the first anthology being the midnight, 12 a.m. On the pocket watch, and with all of the social and like political tumult in the United States over the last couple of years, I really wanted to have a story about perspective because I'm a very sort of moderate thinker. I'm very much in between, and I look at flaws and successes on both sides. So I look at midnight as this passing of perspective, and the reason why it's called, the subtitle is the hour between life and death is because sometimes perspective is the thing that is keeping you between living a fulfilling life and dying or living a fruitless life. So yeah, I just wanted to tie that together with a bunch of fun genre stories. Like we're going to be doing a supernatural murder mystery, a dystopian sci-fi future in there. There is a murder, just like another sort of bootstrap to the ground, gritty Ed Brubaker-esque murder mystery. What else is in there? There's a story about immortal warlords. I'm thinking about putting a comedy in there. I came up with an idea for a comedy, but the thing is that to me, I think really good comedy is incredibly difficult to land. Like I think there's so much bad comedy out there, and if I'm gonna do it, I really want to land it. But I'm think I might also save this story for another anthology where it would thematically tie in better. I won't really tell you what it's about, but the story, the title for that short story is "Needs More Lube." Which I think is just uncharacteristically like really tongue in cheek for me. But if I do it, I want to do it right. But yeah, so we're gonna. It's partly just me being a little indulgent and wanting to play in a bunch of different spaces, and wanting to work with a bunch of new people. But also again, just to kind of flex, my creative muscles and give my readership a little bit of variety. After sticking with me on this one genre story over the last year. So yeah, that's kind of my logic behind it.
Yeah, that's definitely going to give you the opportunity to really branch out and test the waters and different various writing styles and scenarios and situations, time eras. You can really explore your writing creativity, and I think that's going to be something very unique to see out, because I would really like to see your writing outside of this sci-fi aspect, and maybe it's something more realistic or something of that nature. That'd be I would like to see a western too. That would be interesting. You do a space western.
I don't have a space western, but I do in the future. This would be a very long time down the line, probably a couple of years. But I have a very grand scale dystopian future western. It's sort of a western frontier adorned in the scraps of an unachievable future. And it's big and it's an ensemble cast, and I think it could eventually be one of the best things, if not the best thing I will ever write. But it's down the line. I want to make sure I'm the right writer to tell that story.
Gotcha.
And while I think I could do an all right job now, I don't think I'm the guy to make that as good as it could be. So I'm hoping a couple years down the line, I'll be ready to tell that story. But I do have a lot of it sort of formed, and it's going to be great. I'm super stoked for that story. And it features a lovable dog in the cast, which America, if I didn't get you with my comics now, I sure as will then.
Yeah, I'll definitely sign up for it. I love me some dystopian. But so with your characters, I know you said your story itself wasn't necessarily drawn from any kind of real inspiration, just kind of what you wanted to create. But your characters themselves, do they have any real life counterparts? Do you feel like you brought some of yourself into this character? Tell us a little bit about who your characters are.
Yeah, yeah, 1,000%. Each one of those characters have pieces of myself in them, and pieces of people that I know. For me, Kent definitely has a lot of my insecurities about the world and about life, and some of my melancholy, and that sort of sense of helplessness is something that I've definitely experienced, that he feels despite having this incredible potential. If you guys have read the series, you know that he has these really stupendous biological capabilities, but he doesn't use them because he sees them as this really vicious side of himself for a reason that he probably shouldn't. And so, there's a piece of that in me, and with the M character, their sarcasm, their like snappiness, their snarkiness, that is 100% a piece of me, or and things like that. So yeah, each of the cast have very distinct pieces of myself in them, and I don't know, they're just born of experience. And it's funny, there's only so much you can plan out for a character before the writing informs the character more than you will. You'll get to points where you don't really have something planned, or you might have had an idea of who this character was, and then you're like, now that I've gotten this far, that's not something that this character would do. These characters really do take on a life of their own and become something independent of me. So there are aspects of these characters that have changed significantly since the beginning. And even since issue 1 has come out, between then, I think by the time I was kickstarting issue 2, I think I was finishing, the script on issue 5. And by the time I even got to issue 3's Kickstarter, 6 was done. So there was just a lot of evolution for me in understanding who these characters were going to be, and why I might have to separate myself a little bit and just let them live, let them live. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, definitely. Let's see. Mark has a question for you. 2 questions. Can you explain the process of finding talent, and was it difficult to find or approve artists?
Oh, it's agonizing. It's an agonizing process. Let me tell you. Everybody shoots their shot, especially because I started the company during COVID, so a lot of it has been online, and a lot of people shoot their shot, which to some degree I can respect. However, we forget that there are qualities of that M character that come from me, and I'm kind of snarky, and I kind of get a little bit annoyed, when I see like really, really, really novice work, and I'm like, hey, I'm only looking for professional comic book artists, and it's just like, you're not reflecting enough, and now I've wasted my time of like 50 applicants going through your thing and like giving you a fair shake, and you're not even giving me enough of a fair shake to acknowledge that, hey, like, you can't draw something in 2-point perspective, then this isn't going to work. So there's a lot of that, and it's also like it's beyond like the quality of the work, because you want to find collaborators who like whose methodology and the way they work gels with how you work. And fortunately, like, finding guys for the anthology were much easier than finding the team for the Helix project, because by the time I started looking for folks for the anthology, I had written all of the Helix project. We had completed art on up to the middle of issue 4. So I part of it was me figuring out how I like to work over the course of the Helix project, and how to compromise with my art team. And then, I was able to bring that into deciding how I was going to approach collaborators for the anthology. But yeah, it's super difficult, because you're also looking for their ability to interpret script as well. Like, there are some guys out there who are ridiculously talented at rendering images, but not particularly great at translating script.
Gotcha.
And I mean, there's just so much, man. Like, comics are like, in some ways, like the intricacy in comics are even greater than film, because you're playing to the moment, right? In a panel, you're playing to that panel in relation to the panel before and after, that panel with the page, that panel with, you know, the spread, that panel with the entire book. So there are so many different things that go into the making of that singular image. And finding somebody who's going to be able to deliver the appropriate camera perspective and angle, and the layout of the panel itself, and the lighting, and you know, there's so much. So it's ridiculous. And because I am so adamant and nitpicky and critical, you know, I want to work with guys that are going to make me better, that are going to make me feel like I need to up my game as a writer in order to meet their standard, in order to best use their skills. So yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and it's simultaneously exciting and terrifying, looking for new talent. Unfortunately, you know, the end of this year, we had some of these conventions open up, so I got to meet a lot of other guys in the space, and girls who are super talented and passionate, and I like that opportunity to have that conversation with them in person as well, because it's so much more vulnerable. You know, you can pretend as much as you want online. You can steal other people's art online and lie about it and put it in your portfolio. But in person, there's a real humanity to it that you can scope out. And at the end of the day too, like, I want to work on folks that produce content that they're passionate about, and I want to be able to see that.
Yeah, definitely. Mark has another question for you. Let's dive into that. Has talent gone beyond your expectations, and have you learned anything from them?
Ooh, that's a great question. Quick shout out to Jay Fowderline. He said he just picked up the Totality bundle.
Yes.
Appreciate you, Jay. If you guys, real quick, before I do answer the question, again, link in the description next to my name, Trevor. And then you can click the link to the Kickstarter. We're at $2,889. I would love to break 3K in the first day. Or if we could do $3,250 and hit 50% of the entire campaign in the first day, I don't know, like, I'll sign your baby's bald head or something, guys. I don't, whatever you want. Like, this is big. So consider giving it a look. Like, Jay, I appreciate you, buddy. So has talent ever gone beyond my expectations? Yeah, in some ways. I mean, I you know, I'm super particular. And I come into writing my scripts with a very visual understanding of what I want. You know, it goes down to camera angles and shot size, and sometimes lighting and depth and texture and perspective. Like, I go in there and expression. But there are definitely a couple times where my guys were able to use their expertise to kind of present a really good argument and disagree with me, and show me a new way to look at a moment. Like, I've brought up this instance a lot, where at the end of issue 2, the cliffhanger, the last page, I had that shot at a very specific perspective, and my artist gave me 2 layouts, one at my perspective and one at the perspective he thought would work better at. And once I saw his little rough layout, I was like, no, that's it. You're right. I'm wrong. Let's go with that one. But there are also times where it goes in reverse. You know, there's a double page spread in issue 1 that's, I guess, technically the climax of the issue. And it's a super tricky moment, because it's this flashback scene where the entire period is rendered in grayscale, or black and white, basically, with one highlight color. And there's a lot of things that could go wrong in that, and a lot of people have done it poorly. And if I did it, I wanted to be really specific. But there's a splash image where I wanted silhouettes with a white rim lighting on the 2 main figures, the 2 main sort of characters engaged in this bit of action. And my artist didn't want to do it. And I was like, no, like, because he rendered it for me with light shadow, a little bit of shadow, a lot of shadow, and then the full silhouette with the white rim lighting. And I was like, here's the thing, like, this is, first of all, the perspective is striking, but this is going to draw the eye in a very specific way, because it's also going to contrast against all those middle tones of gray, right, that are used to render the rest of the scene. If you just have the stark black and white, it's going to draw your eye to the action, and I think it's going to immortalize that moment in a big bad way. I mean, you know, so I pushed really hard for that, and I made us stick to it. And I don't know, I mean, Brian, you've read the book, you know what moment I'm talking about. Can you imagine that scene without the silhouettes?
Yeah, it wouldn't look nearly as good. Like, it would definitely look good, but it wouldn't have the same depth to it. Like, that that fold out, that layout is just absolutely beautiful. Like it's one of the, you know me, I'm a sucker for artwork. You know, I get
Yeah.
drawn into the artwork, and that was one of the things that solidified me in continuing on with this line was just, you know, that as well as everything else and the writing on top of it. But yeah, that scene is just absolutely beautiful, you know, and it definitely was good to go against his wishes on that one.
Yeah, and it's an ebb and a flow, man. Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm just as proud of that moment for the end of issue 2, where I had decided to go with his idea, you know, because
Hmm.
I think being able to recognize what's going to work best for the story will eventually just kind of result in a better story. You know, I don't care about who's right. I care about who has the best idea. And I think that's
Hmm.
the most important thing to think about in a collaborative art like comics.
All right. So let's say hypothetically I have a script. You know, I have a script. I wrote it up. I want to find some artists. What would you recommend to a new writer coming into the scene? Where do you think they would find an artist? Cons more than likely?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. There's so much to do, man. Um, so first of all, I would 100% um dial in that pitch as best as you possibly can, get a really good idea for the story, the characters, because if you want to get a great artist, you got to have a great story to draw them in, right?
Hmm.
Um, I've honestly found conventions to be one of the best places to do it. It's definitely in some ways the most difficult because you're a lot more vulnerable and you're in person and you're subject to a lot more. But I think it's a good way to connect with people and to sort of share in that passion. Um, so while I think it's the highest risk, highest reward, but there are a bunch of groups online, you know, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or poking around on Twitter. Like look at guys whose names you don't know that are followed by guys that you do know, you know, or just kind of poking through hashtags and looking for artists and going through their body of work, looking at their portfolio. Um, and if you're, it depends on how specific you are as well. So for me, I write super full scripts, so I want to see how somebody translates script. So sometimes in portfolios I'll ask for an original page of the script that they were interpreting off of, or you know, I'll offer to um, give them a page of script that I've written and see what their layout's going to be, right? Because layouts take the least amount of time. And you know, sometimes I'll even throw them a little bit of cash to do that, just not to waste their time. But layouts are just like rough sketches. I want to see their ability to set up perspective and body language and expression and things like that, because that'll usually be a huge indicator. But I'm pretty particular about the whole experience. So yeah, my advice is just to be very clear on what you want, especially if you're posting online. Offer to give pages of script for them to read, amongst a bunch of other things. You know, you got to figure out how much of the story that you know about before you go and try to shop it to other people. I think a lot of folks have an idea and they love it and they're super passionate about it, but they'll go out half baked and be like, I have a superhero story. Who wants to draw it?
Yeah.
You know? Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of the most bare bones answer I could give. You know, I could go into specifics about the sort of the ethics and the creative integrity of the whole thing where I get super nitpicky about. Um, but yeah, it's tasking, but yeah, just honestly poking around online, reaching out to people at conventions, going to shows, and a great way to open up conversation with potential collaborators at shows: buy some of their art prints, buy some of their art. It shows them that you're actually invested in their work, and they're probably going to be a lot more willing to accommodate what you're asking of them in terms of finding potential collaboration. You know, so yeah, if you have a little bit of extra shmoney, instead of buying some crazy like $80 foil variant exclusive to the show, spend it on buying some art prints from artists that you like and might want to work with.
Definitely. All right. So we're going to bring this close in a second, but we're going to answer this last question from Mark. He says, with 4 issues in the can and you being your own critic, is there anything you would have done differently? And what have you learned going forward?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I look back. It's funny, man. I look back on each issue after I'm done with it, and I'm like, oh, why did I let this out into the world? Yeah, I mean, it's funny. In issue 1, I think I surprised a lot of people, despite being such a verbal person, about like kind of pulling back and not writing too much on the page and just being very visual. There were a couple of months where I actually felt a little bit too preachy in that first issue, where I would have pulled back a little bit, or I would have worked a little bit better to tie together some of those sort of like thematic little narrative pieces. Overall, I think they're okay, but I think they feel a little bit disjointed. So I'd probably go back and either remove one of them or sort of um, uh, kind of gradiate between the two of them a little bit better. I mean, there's a couple things I would have done. So that was specific with issue 1. With issue 2, I think it's hard for me to say what I would go back and change there, because I think that was like the moment where I really became I really put my shoes on as a comic book writer in issue 2. And there are things that I did that were really unconventional there, and I'm really proud of like certain swings I made. Like there's a super tense moment after the M character is revealed where I have a double page sequence where I could have done something cool and action packed, but it was actually just like Kent following this mysterious figure through this really shitty blown out apartment building, and then I make you go through 13 panels of like tension and wide eyes and characters noticing things that you might not be privy to, and then the next page, something, Kent is introduced to somebody that he hasn't seen in a very long time, and is forced to make a decision that'll change his life. So, it was a super non-traditional thing that I did, that I was really happy with. But there were a couple moments in issue 3 where I wish I gave a little bit more gravity to certain moments visually, instead of being so concentrated on like welling up a sequence of panels to slow down time. I felt like I could have done that with a little bit better presence. And yeah, so it's hard for me to go into specifics, because I also don't want to like influence somebody who hasn't read them yet into being like, oh, he's right, that's shit. Because I'll point out, if you give me the time, I'll point out a bunch of flaws in my old writing. But ultimately, I'm pretty proud about my advancement, from issue to issue. I mean, 4 is arguably the most poetic issue. 5 has just like some of my favorite things I've ever written, including a little bit of a glimpse at why our antagonist is the way he is, and it's bone chilling. It was just a lot of fun to write, and like the way I wrap up the book, I'm really proud about, because I think that it's going to be pretty divisive and exciting, and I think it's going to generate a lot of conversation amongst people who have stuck with me from the beginning, and in very, I think, interesting ways. So I'm super proud of it, because I think it's telegraphed in a way. Like if you go back and read the series, I think you'll look at it and go, oh, I guess this really could have happened, but we might have been pointed in another direction, and evaded. So yeah, if you give me the time of day, I'd tear apart a lot of stuff that I've done. But I don't regret any of them, especially just being so early on in my career. I don't think any of them were like stupid mistakes. I think it was just learning, and me growing into the writer that I am now, and hopefully continuing to grow into a significantly better writer down the line.
Yeah, in comparison to what people are putting out there, your mistakes are really minuscule in comparison. So let's see. I want to show this off one more time, but I have one more question before we go. Why did you name your main character Kent?
Oh yeah, for
what's
sure.
the significance to Kent?
And just to give folks a little bit of time before I answer, again, please back the project. Link in the description. If you're thinking about holding off, keep in mind that Kickstarter does not charge your payment method until the Kickstarter is over and funded. So if you're thinking about doing it later, but you don't think you have the cash right now, you won't.
You have like 42 days.
Yeah, you're basically promising to pay for it later. So consider backing it now. The earlier we find success in the campaign, the better, because Kickstarter's algorithm is going to be a lot more likely to pick it up and show us to a wider audience of people and find more success and get us to a point where we can make that trade paperback at some point. We're at $2,889 right now. If before the end of the stream we can hit $3,250, I'd like to give away some stuff to the live audience. So if we can hit that $3,250 before we end the stream, I'll have some gifts for some of the live viewers. So consider clicking the link. It's in the description under Follow Trevor, Linktree, and then the first option is the Kickstarter. Bunch of cool rewards. And after I answer the question too, I'll screen share and we can kind of go through the campaign a little bit too briefly.
Okay.
But the question, Kent, yeah, so Kent's name is obviously a play on everybody's favorite Big Blue Boy Scout, Clark Kent. There are some real sort of thematic. There are some real thematic sort of contrast between Clark Kent and Kent Armstrong. In there are also some similarities in their background and their upbringing, but very different sort of responses. There's a moment at the beginning of issue 1 where you're sort of led into a little bit of the psychology and the emotionality of this character, and he crushes up a comic book that is sort of a play on Action Comics #1, but for legal reasons I couldn't use that. And he talks about this idea of symbology and what it means to be a symbol and how powerful those things are, but the weight of that symbology being 100% affected by who that symbol represents, and so we do play around with that metaphorically a lot. And the name Kent for me, I just thought was a really great way to in a subtle sense kind of build a little bit of contrast, between the idea of Superman. And we even actually in issue 4, in one of the few pages of issue 4 that we do have showing like live on the campaign there's a direct reference to Superman as we pick up at the end of after we pick up after the end of issue 3, which is a crazy, like absolutely nuts stinger. But I can read you the narration. This is the first page of issue 4. We were supposed to be some American dream. Some morally well-to-do alien lives by the ideals of his adopted home, puts himself on the line for one of theirs. But when you give them a reason, despite all of that, any reason at all, they hunt you. And the last image is our protagonist literally in cuffs. So it'll show you, there's a lot of non-explicit callbacks to the Superman mythology and what those things represent, as much as there are sort of explicit ones.
Heck yes. I love it. All right, so let's see your screen share.
Sure. Yeah. So we got a question from one of the Comic Boom says, sorry to miss out listening from the hospital. Yeah. What is the biggest character flaw that Kent must face? I would say, I mean, in terms of like his conflict of self, I mean, it's his insecurity, and it's his lack of. It really is his insecurity, like as a human being and as a somebody who is sort of representative of an entire another species, and that inability to maintain a sense of self-identity long enough or cogently enough to build his own sense of agency. That insecurity in who he is weakens him in every sense of the word. So for him, it is 100% about crossing that threshold and coming to iron out an idea of who he is, in tandem and independent of his history and his backstory and the things he's experienced, and also deciding whether or not who he wants to be is who he's been thus far. So yeah, it's a big part of it is that insecurity, that lack of identity. But let me poke on to the screen share here.
While you're doing that, yeah, 46 days. So you can pledge now. I think one of the lowest tiers is like 10 or 15 bucks. You can pledge now and pay later in a month and a half, which has definitely saved my wallet with some of these Kickstarters coming out one after another. Yeah. Luckily, there's not too many out right now that I'm supporting outside of the big two. I got a few Image and Boom Studios, but Kickstarters are nice to just pledge that and have to worry about it in a month and a half.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can. I don't know how to bring the share screen up because you guys can't see anything yet, right?
No, I don't think they can.
It says it's sharing screen. Let me see if I can figure this out. Thank you, Nick. I see that you're saying you're looking into pudging tonight. I appreciate that very much. How do I? Oh, okay. I just had my. There we go. Okay.
2,889.
Yeah, so we're so close, guys. We could hit that 3,250 by the end of the stream, and I can get you some free stuff. So we actually have a little trailer, which you guys should definitely watch. It was produced by a great buddy of mine, Joey Schweickler. There's information at the end of that video as well if you'd like to hire him for any type of graphic design or video editing. Spectacular guy, and a comic book reader. So this is the A cover to issue 4. Drawn by our series interior artist and colored by our colorist, with actually a cover pull quote from my partner in crime tonight, who's just gracious enough to I don't know, give me more praise than I deserve sometimes. So,
I love that. That's fantastic.
I had to put it on there. Yeah, it's gonna get printed like that, man.
It's the first time I've ever been quoted.
There you go, man. Historic. It's a historic event. It was only right that we'd be talking tonight for the release of the book then.
Heck yeah.
Here's that crazy variant cover by Adrian Bone. He is just an absolute powerhouse. Again, you'll have the option to receive a commission from Adrian through the campaign. There are only 2 slots open. He's an absolute beast. The company logo. There's information about like the logistics, this being the 4th book of 6, who my collaborators are, the print, the quality of the print, the 24 pages of story. And then we kind of go through incrementally. Here's a sort of broad idea of what our story is about. You'll get an idea of what all of our covers look like. And then we go sort of issue by issue in a very vague sense, without any crazy spoilers, and show you some of the art from prior issues, this being the page, about symbology that we had mentioned earlier. And you can kind of get an idea of what this story has been building from and building to. So you go all the way down there and you can read through all of that. And shout out Mark McKeever, who is one of our executive producers, who paid to get drawn in and has been such a huge supporter of us that I wanted to make sure that his cameo was a really cool, important one. So we drew his childhood likeness into this moment, and it catalyzes the climax of issue 3. And I think Brian will agree that that climax has kind of been the craziest so far, has it not?
Oh, definitely. I'm super excited to see what happens next.
So results, we have some pages from issue 4 here, along with some interviews and little bits of press that you guys can click on. Eventually, this conversation will be up here as well. But if you want to get an idea of what guys like Brian have been thinking about the series so far and other folks, you can check those out. Otherwise, down towards the bottom, you can get ideas of some of our rewards, like our Be Dangerous Read Comics shirts, which features our the covers to issue 3 and 4 superimposed on the lettering there. And here is that sort of limited edition shirt that's only going to be available as an add-on the first week of the campaign. The exclusive producer sweater. And then a little bit of an example of what Adrian's commissions have looked like in past for other folks.
Those are beautiful.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, they're great. They're great tiers, man. If it wasn't my own Kickstarter, I would want this would be the tier that I would get, because I really, really want an Adrian Bone commission. And then there's the commissions from Marcelo, which these are from prior campaigns. Which, I mean, this Batman just looks ridiculous.
It's so awesome.
Good. It's so good. You'll get an idea of what our add-on menu is like. The things, once you click your rewards tier, you'll have the option to add other products. Of which this menu will give you a good idea of what's available, what they cost, offering pocket watch press face masks for the first time because we're in pandemic hell. So I figured that would be a good way to kind of swag out. And then an example of our stretch goals. So again, like I said at the beginning of the show, the first stretch goal is $8,000. All of the comic book art prints will be upgraded to this really sweet metallic foil finish. And for today only, we can unlock this stretch goal stupendously early if we manage to get 100 backers by the end of this first day. So it's super manageable. Again, it's just 100 backers. They could be 100 backers at any level. At 10,000 for the first time, I'm offering the potential of us unlocking a second variant cover, so a third cover to the series. And as Brian knows, and has said, I've managed to get some ridiculous talent on covers, and we 100% have ridiculous talent lined up for this next cover that I think will absolutely blow your minds. So, yeah, I would very much like to hit that. The stretch goal at 12,500 will be revealed after breaking 10K, and the $15,000 stretch goal, as you can see in the caption here, trust me, it's effing nuts. It is absolutely nuts. It's incredibly unpredictable. None of you will see it coming. There's only one other person that actually knows what it is, and it's Joe from Joe's Geek Show, our trailer producer. And it's bonkers. It's immortalization in many ways. And then if you go even further, you can get a little bit of information about me, my artist Marcelo, my colorist Marcio, and the unsung hero of our book, Taylor Esposito, our letterer. And you can poke through all of the rewards, man. One of the crazy ones for somebody that has a ridiculous amount of Skrilla to be throwing into comic books is for $1,500. I will fly to your town, sign at your local comic book store, take you out to dinner, and hand deliver this slew of rewards. Look at all that.
That's fantastic.
It includes producer credits. It includes one of those cool metal plates that Brian has, art prints, copies of every variant of each copy of the book, like a bunch of stuff. And again, I'll get to come hang out with you at your shop, sign books, take you out to dinner and a drink if you're 21 or older. And you get to ask me whatever you want about the series. There's only 4 of those available. I just thought this was a super cool opportunity. Like I said, you have options to become a producer of the book, grab commissions, catch up to the book in its entirety. And again, if there's something like a copy or a variant cover or whatever that's not included in one of these tiers, you can always add it on in the add-on menu. But there's a ridiculous amount of cool options here. A lot of stuff that, as a consumer that I would want and that I do actively look for when I buy into Kickstarters. I've backed like 16 or 17 other Kickstarters since I've joined the platform. And even for some of you that might have questions about getting into comics, I actually have a tier for a script or a portfolio review where you get copies of the comics and a bunch of other cool stuff. But the main thing being, I will give you a proper in-depth portfolio or script review and, open the door for some editorial consultation, which I do on the side. But you guys know that I am super adamant and super quality focused. And I bring that to other folks' projects when I do give script or portfolio reviews or editorial consultations. So there are a lot of cool opportunities in this campaign. And I really hope you guys consider giving it a look. Like I said before, you're basically at this point, when you pledge to back, you're promising to pay the money by the end of the campaign. So if you wanted to wait until you had the money, it's not going to charge you until the end regardless. And you have pretty much 40 days until this campaign ends. We just hit $3,000, which thank you guys.
Yeah.
That's
so awesome.
That's great. Like I said, if we can hit 3,250 before the end of the stream, we'll do a giveaway for some folks in the audience. So, while we're babbling on, and I answer whatever last questions we might have, consider backing the book, guys. I would super appreciate it. This is absolutely monstrous. I guess I might have a question for you, Brian, man. What's like?
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, man. I appreciate you always holding me down, man. Going into this stuff, what do you think as a consumer and as a reader makes this book stand out? What makes you keep coming back and to have been so gracious as to give me a quote for the cover of the book?
Like I said, man, the artwork is always the #1 seller for me. I know I probably shouldn't be that way, but I am that way. So if like your cover right off the bat immediately caught me, it brought me into it. And I praised you so much on it, but your writing style is absolutely phenomenal. I really enjoy it. I enjoy so many different aspects of it, from your age of getting into these comics, and you're writing like people that have been writing for 10 or 15 years. And it's because of the very particular way that you dive into these. I've accused you of being overcritical on many of things. and but I think it really does play well into your work, you know, because you're overcritical of your own stuff. So you're constantly going over it and trying to figure out, you know, the best way to bring this story forward. Um, and I really, so for me, issue 1 was the real grabbing on point. You know, I'm a big sci-fi nut. I love the X-Files. I love things like that. So something to do with aliens, you know, molecular biology, and that's another aspect. You bring in legitimate science into it. You know, I don't have a degree in anything, so listening to you talk about, you know, the molecular biology of it, and then you know, we've had discussions before on your background of the science and your understanding of it, and it really, you know, it's both educational, but it also very entertaining at the same time, because you're using it in a way that brings in fantasy and sci-fi and things of that nature.
I appreciate that, man. You know, it's yeah, it's always great to get like the outside perspective and to figure out what I'm doing right by somebody else's standards that isn't me, you know, because at the end of the day, like you do have to write for yourself, you know, in many ways. But also, you know, I have like the for me at the end of the day, like the chance to tell the story is an artistic expression and a way to kind of connect with people. And so I have to write to be able to make that connection with other people, and that requires something else. And you know, it's just great to hear, man. So thank you for that.
Yes. So one more question from me. When you were going through the Kickstarter, I noticed something that I haven't asked you yet before, but 1970s. Why did you place it in 1970s? You could have placed it in the 1950s when you had the real big, you know, UFO Area 51 shindig going on, but you decided to place it, you know, 20 years after the hysteria of UFOs was really hitting New Mexico. Why place it in the 1970s era? You know, it was still happening, but it was definitely not to the extent. And why not place it in a modern era?
Well, for me, you know, I mean, historically, like the beginning of the hysteria kind of bubbled a little bit in the 50s, but it was with like the 60s, the end of the 60s, really, and the massive movement of freedom of speech and expression and like drugs, you know.
Mm-hmm.
People became far more outspoken come the 70s. And it was also like a super socially tumultuous time, you know, like that backdrop and that particular era and the desperation of the Cold War during that time, in mixed with that social conflict, I think builds this setting very inherently for a character like Kent, who doubts himself and doubts his identities. It kind of puts him into a much more fierce like pressure chamber that makes him doubt a little bit more about himself, and it gives him more to overcome over the course of the series. So part of it was like a little bit historical, and the knowledge that like the hysteria, you know, of UFOs really kind of came to a boiling point and became an international sort of social phenomenon in like the late 60s, early 70s. It was also just that tumult and that conflict. That and it's also like it's close enough to the end of the Cold War where who knows, our heroes, our protagonists could fail, and maybe the government does you know, polish off the Helix project, and it's very viable. I don't want the story to be predictable, you know. The story just has to have some sense of like satisfaction or some sense of closure. It doesn't have to be what you were looking for. So who knows? Maybe the bad guy wins, and we get to the point where they do end the Cold War because it's close enough to that time period. So who knows?
That sounds a lot of fun. All right, man. Well, I am about out of questions for you.
Oh man, it was a blast hanging out. I wish I could refigure out how to put us both on the screen at the same time, but for some reason I can't. Thanks, internet. But yeah, we're now at $3,016 on the campaign. Love to hit 3250. And if anybody has any last minute questions, I'd be glad to address those. But yeah, otherwise, man, it's a blast getting to hang out. I really, really, really hope you guys consider giving the book a look, potentially giving it some support if you're not financially able to. I'm not playing. Sharing the link is such a big help. Just getting the exposure out there, getting the the searchability, you know, of this property up on these algorithms, it's just huge. And just recommending it personally to people, you know, you're like, you know, breeze over the Kickstarter page, see what interests you, talk to somebody and say, hey, this guy has this comic that looks super cool. It's independent. It's free of corporate interests and those really poor storytelling tropes that come along with those things. It's by a passionate creator and somebody who really, really pushes the boundary in trying to deliver as much value as humanly possible for what you guys are spending. So, you know, I hope you guys consider giving it a look, man. It's a real passion project. And I look forward to the opportunity to be able to tell more stories and to get better as a storyteller, thanks to folks like Jay and Mark and Joey and Brian and that you know, give me that support and give me that leeway and that sort of catwalk to be able to do this thing. But let's see. I see we have a question from Jay here. He doesn't know if he answered it. How long did it take me to get the story done? Well, basically, I would say just shy of a year. I mean, to get it edited and all. To write the scripts, I mean, I probably had a rough idea. I mean, I knew how the story was going to end a long time ago. By the time I finished writing the script to issue 1, I knew how the story was going to end in some sense. But you know, from start to end, last page of issue 24, I would say maybe 6 to 8 months for me, just because I wear a bunch of different hats for the business, so I'm not always able to delegate as much of my time to the creative side of things as I'd like. So hopefully, you know, the better we do with campaigns like this, I'll be able to bring on other people that put me in a position where I can have a greater creative output and deliver more comics to you guys. So yeah, it took about 8 months to finish these scripts. But yeah, so I guess I think that's probably all the momentum we're going to get for the campaign tonight. $3,016. Super appreciative. This is a great start to the campaign. Still have time left in the evening, gentlemen. So please consider giving it a look. And yeah, I'm still like, my brain is still just wrapped with how to put both of us on the screen at the same time. Like, I have a college degree. You'd think I could figure this out, but I absolutely cannot.
Yeah, I can't figure it out.
Well, here we are. the end of the road here. What am I reading these days? I don't know, Brian, you start. What are you reading these days that you're really enjoying?
Oh man, I am reading everything these days. Let me think about that for a second. What am I reading that I'm really enjoying? Because I'm reading all of DC stuff, all of Marvel stuff. You know what? The X-Men have just been killing it.
Yeah.
It has just been such an amazing line. It is arguably some of the best stuff that's coming out of comics right now. I am thoroughly enjoying it. It's spanning over, you know, we have all the different issues. We have X-Force, we got Wolverine. You know, we have so many different lines coming together. And for me, I've been saying for a long time that the X-Men, it looks like that they've been building them up for, you know, I know Hickman's run is essentially done at this point. And we're gonna have to see how they do moving forward. But I can't help but feel the inevitable doom for the X-Men, because there's so many cards stacked against them. You know, all of humanity is fighting against them. You have, you know, Nimrod's back online. You have so many different things. And then not only that, you have the rest of the freaking universe who is just now poking at the X-Men, because they've, you know, essentially thrown up the flag and said, hey, you know, look, everyone, we're here. We're a system now. We're something to be respected. And because of that, it's gotten them a lot of unwanted attention. So the whole story, it's just like, you know, you're waiting for the X-Men to fail. And then you have the Scarlet Witch, who comes out of left field and decides that she's going to make mutant heaven and never have to worry about mutant deaths again. And so, you know, what does immortality mean now for mutant kind? And it's just, it's gotten so extensive. And it's like, you know, is there an ending point to this, or is there going to end up being some kind of catastrophic failure?
Yeah, conceptually that sounds pretty crazy, and pretty nuts. I dipped off a little while ago. I was really excited when they got into like House of X, Powers of X, and like into Dawn of X, and I felt like it kind of got out of their hands a little bit, so I ended up dropping off. But that does sound super interesting. In terms of what I'm reading, man, I'm mostly keeping up with indie stuff. Although I will say, one superhero book that was just spectacular. I haven't read the third issue, but what I enjoyed of it was fantastic. Was Robin and Batman in that order, by
Yes.
Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. It's just super emotional, psychological, a great maturization of Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson's early relationship. And I've just really enjoyed that book. Surprisingly, Batman the Imposter by Mattson Tomlin and Andrea Sorrentino was spectacular. I am usually like super disinterested in like movie or television crossover comics, but man, that book was spectacular. Probably one of the most enjoyable Batman books I've read in a long time. Always, man, big time on the indie track. The Good Asian by Pornsak Pichetshow. It's been excellent. The Many Deaths of Layla Starr was easily one of my favorite stories of the year by Ram V and Felipe Andrade. I mean, Brubaker's been doing a great job with the Reckless series, and they just actually printed his book Friday with Marcos Martin that came out through Panel Syndicate originally as a digital exclusive. Also, actually, I feel like I need to say this in public because I haven't said it yet. Scott Snyder's like doing some of the best work of his career with the Comixology exclusive stuff that's going to be printed by Dark Horse. Like, I haven't had the opportunity to afford him such great compliments, but his book with Francis Manipul, Clear, is one of my favorite comics so far that I've read in the last couple of years. And that's high praise. It's a fantastic book. And I say that as somebody who's been a critic of a lot of Snyder's recent DC work and even Undiscovered Country. Clear is fantastic. It like him and Francis Manipul are just firing on all cylinders. Would highly recommend it. If you have Comixology Unlimited or Amazon Prime, I think you can read them for free, which is stupendous. And I really, really look forward to picking up their the physical print when Dark Horse produces those, because they're nuts. So yeah, I had to give Scott Snyder that compliment.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out because I have not seen anything on that yet. And to be fair, I probably just wasn't paying attention, but I definitely want to check that because I love his Noctera. Noctera is just absolutely phenomenal. I just actually got done covering Blacktop Bill special. And so you get to find out the origin story of Blacktop Bill, which was just, you know, he's essentially a hitman for Hitman. And so it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed diving into that one. But like you were saying, Robin and Batman, that was an absolutely phenomenal line. I wasn't much for the artwork, you know, it's kind of watercolory and I'm not a big fan of it, but the story was just so good. I was easily able to overlook that and really dive into it. And Robin's excuse for coming up with the name and the costume and everything like that was just absolutely wonderful. And it just shows the great yin and yang that goes between the two of them and how much Robin truly helped Batman grow throughout the years.
Yeah,
and
honestly.
really establishing what his symbol meant to him.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love Dustin Nguyen. I like that watercolor stuff. I think it really adds a sense of memory to this whole thing. You know, it feels like it's playing out like a memory. And I think that sort of washy layered watercolor approach really gives it that aesthetic. I also just love Dustin Nguyen. Like he's one of my favorite Batman artists ever. He did some early stuff like way back when Judd Winnick was writing Batman and Under the Hood. It wasn't watercolor stuff. I forget who he was colored by, but Dustin Nguyen has always been like a favorite of mine. So to see him and Jeff Lemire on a book, I mean, it's a Batman book, but it's more a Robin book, which I've been asking for like a great Robin book for so long, and we finally got one by Jeff freaking Lemire. So yeah, it's a fantastic book. Like I said, The Many Deaths of Layla Starr by Ram V, Felipe Andrade. I think the trade just came out for that. It's really good, super existential. I say that it's like Hayao Miyazaki movies from like Studio Ghibli meets like Neil Gaiman. It very much feels that way to me. Nightwing has also been pretty good. I'm a little bit behind in that, but I was really enjoying it where I left off. I've been doing a lot of back issue reading though. Like I've now officially read every single issue of Daredevil that has ever existed. I went through chronologically and I caught back up. So that was super nutty.
So you're into Devil's Reign?
It's pretty good. Yeah. I haven't read the second issue yet. I think
have you read Superior 4?
No. So I read up to
read Superior 4.
So I've gone up to the last page. I mean, I've read up to the end of issue 1 of Devil's Reign, which I don't think the bulk of that issue was very good, but the last couple pages of that issue were enough to keep me on. So that's going to be super interesting. I just purchased the Darwin Cook Parker graphic novels, which I'm super stoked to get into. That's probably something I anticipate most out of the next couple weeks of reading. And I just got some Kickstarter packages in from a graphic novelist named Mathieu Beblé. He's French and he's won several graphic novel awards. And the Kickstarter awards for Shangri-La and Carbon and Silicon finally came out, and I'm like halfway through Shangri-La. It's a beautiful story. A couple like little dialogue things that I would point out, but it's been translated from French, so it's bound to happen. Otherwise, it's so beautifully done. It's super well written. It's really poignant. So those have been great. Just to shout out like another big indie guy who's just absolutely killing it right now.
Yeah. Mark, you said you like Dark Knights of Steel miniseries. I am also enjoying that quite a bit. It's a very interesting story. I'm really excited to see where it's going to go next. You know, it has lots of potential with the next couple issues. It's really going to pan out, and we're going to see exactly, you know, who the protagonist is and how it's all going to play out with Batman now being Kryptonian. It's going to be very interesting, or half Kryptonian.
Yeah, it's an interesting series. Conceptually I like it. I think it's fun. I think it's inventive, and I like Tom Taylor. Certain things where I can see he's indulging in some like Tom Taylorisms that I find predictable, but not everybody's like sat there and studied the guy's writing, you know. But overall I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. It's fun. It's the nice thing is like you could just jump into that with absolutely no reading experience and just have a good time. So
yeah, you don't really need to know much.
Yeah, that's great. It's super accessible. Otherwise, we'll get, I guess, one last tally to see where we're at for the end of the night. Where we are so far. So yeah, the 3016. I know, Joey, you might have mentioned that you threw down. It's not registering with me yet, so I might double check, pal. But otherwise, I'm grateful, man. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to hang out with everybody tonight to talk comics. For everybody that's asked questions and shown that level of interest, I'm super grateful to my returning backers and to those of you who during this conversation have decided to give it a look. If you're watching this in post after we've gone live and it's on the interwebs forever, please consider clicking the link in the description below. Today is January 17th, 2022. You have just over a month to back it, but the sooner the better. So consider backing the book, man. It's something I've been super passionate about. I feel like I've grown big time as a writer throughout the course of the series, and I shit you not, the best is yet to come. So there's always something great to look forward to, and I'm grateful to my artistic collaborators that make it all possible: Marcelo Salaza, Marcio Freri, Adrian Bone, Taylor Esposito, Joey for putting the helping me put the logo together and for producing the trailer, and guys like you, Brian, man, that just show me a ridiculous amount of support, that are kind enough to let me know their thoughts on the books after, and who again probably afford me more compliments than I actually deserve. So I'm grateful, man. So thank you.
Of course, buddy. I can't wait to see what you got coming for us next. I'm excited. You know, it's only 6 issues, so I'm hoping that ending is gonna really stick it. You know what I mean? I'm really hoping that your ending brings it.
It's crazy, man. I mean, like I said, I think it is in some ways telegraphed by certain things in the series, but I still think there are going to be a lot of people with dropped jaws when they get to page. Well, it might be oversized, so it might not be page 24. It'll probably be a later page, but when they get to that last page, you guys know I'm known for last pages now. So that one's the craziest by far.
Nice. I can't wait, bud. I'm super excited. I'm glad we were able to help you out today.
Thanks, man. We appreciate that. And you know, if you guys are here, obviously make sure, if you're not already, check out Brian, subscribe to Brian. There's links to his channel in the description below. He puts out an incredible amount of content. So he's always giving you guys something to watch, which is something that I could never say. So
yeah, covering at least 15 comics a week. Try to at least.
Jesus, man.
Stay busy.
Man, I haven't posted a YouTube video in like 5 months, and I keep telling myself I'm going to do it, but have not yet. So yeah, go check Brian out too. Consider giving the comic a look, and yeah, I look forward to what we're all going to do together, and what type of stories I'm going to be able to tell in the future, thanks to you guys and your support. So give the book a look, show us some love, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon. Keep an eye out on our social media. Again, link in the description through the link tree. You can find us at Pocket Watch Press on pretty much, I mean, any major social media. And through them, you can sign up for our newsletter as well, which brings you behind the scenes on everything we do. We'll do some behind the scenes stuff about the craft and how we go from the page of script all the way to the finished comic book page. We'll give you guys voting opportunities to be able to decide on things that we do next. Like the whole anthology thing, that was voted on by our newsletter subscribers. They got to decide whether or not we would do the anthology or not. They got to decide on the design for the new campaign shirt, amongst a bunch of other things. So, you know, you get a lot more say. You get to be the first to know when we do anything. For example, like getting the title of the anthology series a week and some change before I revealed it publicly, and sneak peeks at art, which is a lot of fun. Like guys like Brian, because they're part of the newsletter, they saw the covers to issue 4 months ago, before I made them public. So cool benefits like that. Back the book. Subscribe to Brian, subscribe to me if you feel like it. I can't promise I'm gonna be good about putting out a bunch of content, but there's some cool stuff in the backlogs. But yeah, man, thank you for having me on, Brian. Thank you for giving me the time of day.
Of course, bud.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for watching. I super appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you guys again in the future. So you guys have a great night. Stay safe, and read some comics.